every.
I want to welcome everyone to Seminar Room 1.
Yeah.
This is a new world and hybrid working. We have 4 fantastic guests with us here today. We have Aisling from Grow Remote, Neil from Alter Domus, Ian from Guidewire, and Carol from DPS Group. All graduate, mainstays every year with ourselves. Aisling comes from a company called Grow Remote, which is based around the production or the enhancement of remote working across Ireland with various companies. So it's obviously a really, really important topic at the moment regarding productivity, work-life balance. Is that the way we even say it now? Is it something different? What does it look like for us personally, etc., etc.? So first question I'll ask is to Aisling. On a personal note, you've said that you have worked remotely or hybrid for a long time now, even pre-pandemic. What does it mean to yourself personally, hybrid working?
You mean the benefits of it?
Or even how has it looked, in practice, the benefits, pros, cons, in your personal life?
The benefits are you get to have a life, you save that 2 hours commuting a day traditionally or whatever. So what I have learned is you really have to structure your day. You have to say, okay, I'm going to set this time aside for focus time, this time aside for collaboration, and very often use collaboration actually for the days you do meet up with people in whatever capacity that is. So hybrid working, there are 4 different versions of it: fixed, remote, office first, remote first, flexi hybrid, etc. So there are variations of them. And I think it's understanding what they are and what you're going to be forced or what you're going to be faced with when you start your new job.
So I know this is based on hybrid working, but if you're looking at fully remote, let's take that as an example.
Yeah.
From your own experience, what is the pros and cons of fully remote compared to hybrid?
The interesting thing about fully remote is how people have adapted to it through COVID. They've had to adapt to it through COVID. And some companies find that they are actually far more productive because they can use asynchronous work or they can use synchronous work, but mainly asynchronous with regards to how they function on a day-to-day basis. They can also, it's the benefit of having global teams working in different projects. So it is, from my perspective, the benefit of remote working is you get to do the things you really like. You get to play GA or rugby or go to the cinema or whatever, but you do have to manage your time quite strictly. Whereas you possibly wouldn't have to do that if you're in the office because it's more managed for you.
Perfect. Thanks, Aisling. Just in terms of any questions, folks, we do have a piece of functionality called Slido, slido.com. If you do have any questions, you could just go straight to slido.com, stick in the seminar room 2023, and I'll be able to ask those questions at the end, if you don't want to do it the old-fashioned way, of course. Neil, in terms of Alter Domus, what does hybrid work look like for graduates and interns?
So hybrid working really is just that split between home and office work. It's the ability, I suppose, to have that split between home and office, but also to work from anywhere. So often people are renting where our main office is in Cork. So people aren't necessarily from Cork, and we have someone who's working from Sligo, so a lot of the time they'll work in Sligo on a Monday and Friday and come down to their rented accommodation Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and they have the ability to work home, office, or in an alternative location. For graduates especially, it's about getting that mix in terms of how much they're in the office, because while there's so many advantages of working remotely, we do feel that especially this year's graduate program that they are longing that connection with other staff, especially people who are just coming out of college and maybe two to 2.5 of their 4-year undergraduate has been during COVID and has been remote, so they have missed a lot. So we feel that adjustment to, let's say, going from a college environment into an office environment and how you tweak your style in terms of professionalism, it is important to be in the office a little bit more. We have people, and we feel like it's not something that we have to make an effort to get people back into the office. But we have people, let's say we have a graduate that's currently based in Waterford who's travelling to our Cork office. We're going to say, look, it's 50-50 whether you want to be in the office. However, but he wants to be in the office 4 days a week because he feels like, because he's new, it's his first ever full-time job, he said, I don't want to miss anything, I want to get used to things. I'll exercise that flexibility and that hybrid and that 50% turn out of my feet a little bit more on the table. So it is very interesting in terms of what graduates, their attitude towards it, compared to more established employees like myself.
Perfect. And this might be jumping into a little bit of the meaty pieces of hybrid working a little bit, but there is the sentiment from some corners about the idea of silent quitting, is that now you have 3 days at home, this is a slowdown, this is a recuperation period, and you actually will work less but be more productive maybe on the 2 days in the office. I'm not saying necessarily have you experienced that in Alter Domus, but do you see that as a risk of hybrid working, that days that you are at home, you do step back a little bit more, you do a little bit less? Or do you think that's when you balance it out with the other pros and cons, that is an almost beneficial part of it?
Yeah, I think it balances out. I think if someone's going to take a step back and, let's say, maybe take it easy, whether they're in the office or at home, that will probably happen. I think that whole silent quitting piece, or someone stepping back, I think that's maybe almost like the isolating part of it, and like the people moving, because I suppose the fact that people aren't in the office as much and they're not meeting their mates and having a chat at the coffee machine, I suppose it's
the water cooler.
Quitting, you're almost quitting. It's more of a job. There's less of an association with the organisation because you're meeting people a little bit less. So like we don't really find that, like, if the people who are stepping back and have to be managed at home, I think we haven't really seen an increase in that, whether it's like full-time remote or full-time in the office.
Very good. I'm not speaking from personal experience with silent quitting, but I've read it online. Ian, what would a graduate expect in the hybrid world of Guidewire? What would a graduate intern expect in terms of the actual recruitment process, interviews, assessment centres? What does that look like for yourselves?
I might pick it up in a second. I just want to maybe go back to the last question, because I think it's quite interesting, is that I suppose, first of all, that idea of kind of silent quitting, as I think a bit of a misnomer. Like we recruited all the way through COVID, through lockdown, we hired, we grew. Like we got an email on a Sunday night telling no one to turn up to the office on a Monday morning back in May 2020, and we never saw any drop in productivity. So I suppose for me, the hybrid model is more about how you choose to do certain types of work. So if you're in the office, it's highly collaborative, it's highly networked work, it's planning exercises, strategy exercises, and then having that time maybe at home to do that more heads down focus work. And I suppose that's kind of our model for hybrid an awful lot. So it's not necessarily about doing more or less. Like you may actually come into the office and in terms of pure productivity get less done in your day, but in terms of building rich networks that, you know, facilitate your growth in terms of your career, that's much more important, and that's a longer term kind of strategy for that. So I think over the course of, you know, a week or a month or a quarter, it blends out. I also think as well that, like, you know, a lot of good graduate programs now, you know, keep very close, you know, not close tabs, but they keep a very good sense of kind of how graduates are getting on. So I think this idea that you could have someone who just drops out and does nothing isn't really the case. And to me, that would be more indicative of actually, okay, why aren't we motivating this person? Like, how can we help train them? Like, is there some issue going on here? As opposed to necessarily just a hybrid question, you know? Anyway, just your question about, you know, what does that interview process or interview experience look like? Is it both interviews or just interviews and onboarding you're looking at?
From start to finish, from application to their first day on the job, where are the hybrid elements in that process? Yeah,
so I suppose we've always done a lot of kind of like, you know, a mixed interview style. So we always had kind of some remote stage of interview. So we essentially have a 3-stage interview process. And the first 2 stages were, the first was fully automated with an online technical code test. The second was what we would call a phone screen, or kind of an online meeting screen of a technical and cultural ability. And then the last one would have been an in-person face-to-face meeting. Now, you know, those 2 stayed the same during COVID, and obviously our third step, our in-person face-to-face, just became an online Zoom meeting. There are definitely some negatives to that. I think some candidates find that experience quite, you know, off-putting. I think some interviewers find that experience quite off-putting as well. It can be nice to kind of actually speak to people in person and see them in person. So we're really pushing to kind of get candidates back for that final stage in person, in our offices, showcase them our collaboration facility, showcase them the kind of working we like to do, what it means to be in that hybrid model. So rather than just talk through it, bring them into the office, give them an example of it, show the kind of rooms they're going to be working in and the kind of collaborative stations they're going to be in. But other than that, I suppose for the most part, it has remained quite the same. Like, you know, like I said, we had strong growth targets before COVID, and we actually grew those during COVID and really looked to double our hiring during that period. So it had an effect in terms of our throughput or what we were hiring. But I suppose we are looking to kind of bring that back into a more mixed model now, with the final stages being in person in group interview settings or batch interview days, and those first few stages still being kind of an online system or a remote interview.
Very good. And in terms of Guidewire, I think you probably answered this question already. Do you ever foresee a situation where even certain teams will go back fully in person?
Never.
Like,
I suppose, again, for us, even at a graduate level, we give an awful lot of accountability and responsibility to people. It's a real ethos and core ideology of our graduate program, is this idea of really strong support, really strong mentoring, really strong training, but also then the scope for people to grow and learn and take on responsibility they feel comfortable with. And to us, remote working is just an example of that. If this is our ideology and we trust people, we trust them whether they're in the office or whether they're remote. So I don't particularly buy into this idea that, because there's a bum on a seat there in front of me, they're doing a different or better kind of work. I would rather actually say to you, well, how do you want to work? What days would you like to come into the office? And we would recommend, probably in your early stages of your career, maybe 2 days a week. But also, let's be intentional about what that looks like. So the idea that we would have a blanket, you're back in the office 5 days a week or X days a week for the sake of legacy and history, I just don't think it's the company we are. We have been very successful, we have grown and been very productive during COVID, so it would be completely irrational for us to now just back out and say, well, we're going to change this. We also, as an organisation, we have 13 offices around the world and 6 in the group I'm in, so you would regularly be working with people outside of your home office or your home base, so that's a type of remote work anyway. So we could have a team of 10 people with 2 people in 5 offices around the globe. So again, it is part of our ideology that you just work remotely with people, be that maybe when you're in the office or maybe when you're at home. I think a big thing as well is support companies give for hybrids. So we do have kind of an allowance for people when they join, a €500 allowance to allow them to get a proper home working setup. We don't necessarily dictate what that is, so they may have some equipment already, but they might buy a second monitor or a chair or a table or a standing desk or something like that. So it's about supporting graduates especially as well, who maybe don't have that setup to work successfully remotely, so they don't feel that pressure to come to the office on the days they would prefer to work from home.
Thanks, Ian. Carol from DPS.
Thank you.
How has hybrid working affected culture? So we know how it affects the individual in terms of the pros and cons, etc. But how would it affect, or how has it affected the culture of DPS over the last 2.5 years?
Well, I suppose to be honest, DPS we stayed open throughout COVID. So we're a professional services engineering company. We were deemed essential services because we were supporting farm and advanced technology during that time. But we did obviously have restricted employees in the office. I would say how it impacts culture is, obviously you're working at home, there's less chance to kind of soak up that, I suppose, how we do things around here. Everybody goes into their own normal way and their own routines at home. I think what's really important is visibility of leaders. Communication is really important. Making sure that you're bringing, I suppose, little snippets of culture and, I suppose, the atmosphere of the office down through the kind of the virtual network as well. In terms of DPS, I suppose we were, as I said, we were open the whole time, we restricted numbers, but it was really important, a bit like what you're saying there, we were collaborating the whole time with colleagues overseas as well. So I suppose it didn't really impact us hugely, if I'm being really honest, but I can see how in some cases where there was a full shutdown and people joined, especially if they joined over culture, and if a big part of, I suppose, the culture is being in the office and being in the vibe and the energy and the environment and picking up the creativity around others, building out your network. Like obviously if you're not in the environment, it is more difficult to kind of emulate that at home. So for us, I think, leaders played a big part in regularly updating staff, having town halls, having more regular updates than we would have ever had, I suppose, All
right, thanks very much. Big question, I suppose, in terms of, I was doing a teaching seminar there about an hour ago, and it came up on the screen, the 3 reasons why you should be a teacher, and it was June, July and August. In terms of remote working, obviously we know that there's the pro is the commute time, especially for anyone who works in a large metropolitan area, the commute time is a big one. So we are, on face value, we want to work from home, we don't want to be out there, but for some people they don't find it productive to be at home. I know, Ashley, you mentioned about having that structure to the day, working away from your living areas, etc., etc. What is the one, if you have any productivity tips, what are the big ones for people that wouldn't find it naturally? My own time in college, I could never study at home and had to be in the library. What are those type of tips for somebody and for people here going to work in a hybrid graduate career? What are those productivity tips?
funnily enough, I think actually going to your local library is one of them. So some people can feel very isolated on the days they're at home, they're a little bit at sea. One of the big things is in Ireland now we have close to 300 working hubs, and that doesn't include the private ones. And there are 4,500 desks in Ireland where you can go and rent a desk for a day or a week or whatever. There's also a voucher scheme from the government where you can have 3 days in a working from a remote home. So that may give you the option for a little bit of vibrancy, people from other cultures there, etc. The other one is if you've got buddies who work from home, is literally team up with them, do 1 day in their house, 1 day in your house, etc. So that would be my main thing, is go out and find somewhere to do it. And the other thing is, go remote. We've noticed with a lot of our client partners who are trying to figure out the remote journey. We have a training course for people coming into the job market where you learn how to be what's called remote work ready. So if anybody wants to do that, we can give a voucher to anybody. It's normally I think €29, but we'll do it for free here. But that a lot of our partners love to see that people have that. So they get a lot of the tips of the trade, tips and tools on how to survive in remote working.
Thanks, Ashley. And same question to yourself, Neil. I mean, a graduate comes to yourself, months into the role and really isn't finding the hybrid model working for them. What are the tips you would give them in a similar sense?
So yeah, obviously there's the option, if you're not going to be in the office full time.
Is that important, do you think? In terms of, fair enough, you had the option to have hybrid, but you can go to work in the office full time. Is that an option that Alter Domus provide?
It is, yeah.
So they do have, graduates and interns and any staff do have the option. If hybrid isn't working, you have full time in the office. I'm sure that's pretty common across the board. Yeah.
So we actually had, let's say, one intern last year who came in, and her manager was the exact same. 2 of them just didn't like working from home, so the 2 of them just used to come in 5 days a week, every week, and they loved it. They got on great. But if I was to give one person a tip in terms of how do you make it work, how do you make that hybrid work, the days you are at home, is that you structure it. When COVID started, working from home, it's very easy for me to just roll out of bed, put on a pair of shorts, a t-shirt, land into the room next door, and you're neither here nor there. You're neither at work or you're neither at home, and there was just none of that structure there. So I find get up at a certain time, still have your breakfast, prepare your food the same way you have to do as you're in the office. Have scheduled lunch breaks, change your clothes after work. When you close your laptop, that's the end of work. It's the same, because when you're in the office, you get up, you get dressed, you do that commute. When you leave the office, that's very much finalisation, and you get changed. I find myself, I just have to replicate that a little bit. So it just creates that little bit of separation between home and work, and it helps you get into that mindset. Structure your days as well. The days you're in the office, maybe have less meetings. If you know that you're going to be at home on a Tuesday morning, it's a lot easier to jump from meeting to meeting to meeting. Maybe the days that you're in the office have less meetings, so that you're at your desk a little bit more, and you're much more open to collaboration, and you're not necessarily running into a meeting room or having those meetings at your desk. So it's just about structuring your week to make sure you're as productive as you need to be when you're at home or you're in the office.
Perfect, thanks. And Ian, with this very similar question, I suppose, is that there is a risk that hybrid working becomes as fixed as fully in the office, in the sense that you have 2 days, 3, Wednesday in the office, Thursday at home, Friday in the office, and it becomes the same routine as the fully in the office would have been. It's really obviously important then to be flexible in a micro sense in your day, to be able to change it up, and to have that macro changes in the days that you go into the office. Guidewire, is it a case, for example, a specific circumstance, is it fixed hybrid in the sense of in Wednesday, Friday, or is it very much change the days?
Right now we're kind of in a collaboration process with our team, and this has been going on for a couple of months, and I think it's very important for us to get our team's take on this about what works for them. Obviously I'm part of a management team, so my way of interacting is very collaborative because that's just the nature of my job, but people on projects might have a different collaborative nature. So I suppose for us, our office is open 5 days a week. So if someone wants to come in 5 days a week, they can. We do have some employees who do that. And we do recommend to graduates that they come in. It's not a set 2 days a week, but we say on average, maybe over the course of a couple of weeks, maybe 1 to 2 days blended over that week. And that might be that maybe we have a training week or a planning week where they come in for all 5 days or 4 days or things like that. And maybe the next week is very much focused time and they put their head down. But again, it's about being intentional when they're in there. That like, if you find yourself doing the exact same work, or if you find yourself like, my panelist was saying here, having 7.5 hours of meetings in a day when you're in the office with people who aren't in the office, why are you in the office? That doesn't make any sense. You've just, taken time out of your day and money out of your pocket to come in and do the work you could be doing at home. But if you find yourself on a call in a Zoom with 5 people and you all live in Dublin, you should ask yourself, why are we not in the office doing this? Why could we not get on a whiteboard and plan this out? Why could we not do this architectural diagram in person? Why could we not have lunch afterwards? And also we provide services for that. So it's about, I think, being intentional to make sure you don't get into that, okay, Tuesday's my day and I go in, rail, hail or shine, no matter what's happening. It's very much on a project level. And on a track level on a project, we get the tracks to organise their own time, and we say, look, we recommend you come in. You might be working with some remote people as well. You might be working with some people outside of the Dublin office, and you almost certainly will. Your customer might be in the US, and you've got to take that into account. So maybe, what you do is you come in, or we have like core hours that maybe you come in between 10 and 4, and we allow people time to beat the traffic or have a different commute time. It's not about a one-size-fits-all. It's about a constant conversation about how hybrid works, what kind of training and support we need to provide, always reviewing it, doing regular retrospectives with our team about, does a certain role have a different structure, does a certain level have a different structure, do certain people need different things? Some people can be very collaborative remotely and actually less collaborative in person, and taking that into account as well. And then again, just re-emphasizing with people that no matter if you are remote or in person, that idea of collaboration, that idea of teamwork, that idea of connecting with your colleagues and helping both mentor and learn from them is really, really important, and how best you do that depending on your context, really, I suppose. So it's not like we have this one-size-fits-all. It is very much an ongoing conversation and something that we regularly, I've twice monthly check-ins with all my teammates or all my team members, and I'll regularly ask them, how is this going? Especially the newer, more junior members who are maybe on the start of that graduate journey. That is a big topic of conversation about how does it suit you. Forget about the global, but what do you think about this? Do you enjoy it? Do you like it? What could we do for you to support you better on this journey,
Thanks. Anything to add to that, Carol? Productivity tips, micro changes to your day, what students can do to prepare after 2.5 years being in college, hybrid learning. Any tips for
well, I actually agree with everything that's already been said. I think the transitions are really important, and structure. And exactly like you mentioned there, we were used to kind of getting up, travelling to work, having that kind of time to reset and get into work mode and start thinking about, okay, what do I need to get done, etc. So I think definitely if you're at home, structuring your day if you can is really, really vitally important, so you don't have that blend. I think we have gotten better at that, and there's definitely been more advice and support around doing that. I think there's a play, something here for managers as well. So managing remote teams is important, and how you connect in with your graduates, for example. And I think definitely focusing on, I suppose, what the outputs are as opposed to the inputs. So what are the performance goals? What are the deliverables? Are you communicating very clear timelines? And where can somebody go for help? So if there's a problem with a deadline, if there's a challenge, what you don't want is somebody who's at home remote waiting, for you to call them. There needs to be an open kind of communication channel there for people to I suppose just reach out and look for support. I think from a graduate perspective, particularly for us in DPS, we do encourage people to come into the office in the early stages of their career, and that's purely to, I suppose, be mentored by more senior professionals, more senior engineers, and also to build out your network. And a little bit like one of you guys mentioned there around having a flexible approach, I think you'll have certain people who are more senior who will come in on certain days of the week, and that's great, you'll get to meet them in those days. But if you come in every day, or if you come in a variety of days or mix your days up, you will get to meet more people outside of your team as well, and there'll be more kind of opportunity just for those kind of connections, because I think that's what's really important in the early stages of your career as well, is just building those connections with your colleagues, finding out where to go for information, and then just picking up all that tacit knowledge as well that you would just in those informal kind of interactions.
Many thanks, Carol. We have come to time. We have no questions on Slido at the moment, folks. Does anyone want to put up their hand if they have a question? And we can take it the old-fashioned way. Silence is golden. Perfect. Both Carol, Ian and Neil all have stands here today, so please drop by and have a chat. AishlingGrowRemote.com for more .ie for more information. And a round of applause for our panel here, folks. Gave us their time.
Thank you.